What do you do when you've spent decades searching for your true purpose, only to find that mastery in many fields can't fill the void left by passion? Today on LifeJacked, the Resilience Podcast, I'm honored to welcome a man who has navigated that very crossroads. Jordan Power's journey from a prolific radio and TV producer and celebrated columnist to a groundbreaking entrepreneur and thriving artist is a testament to the courage of reinvention. From building the world's first cardboard beach to embracing his long-forgotten dream of music and overcoming life's many challenges as an LGBTQ plus trailblazer, Jordan's story illuminates the path of radical transformation and soulful resilience.
Sometimes life gives us lemons. Sometimes it gives us lemonade. Other times it gives us something entirely out of left field that makes us say, WTF. But no matter what obstacles come, there is most often a way out on the other side, and we are once again victorious. My name is Dr. Ro, and you are listening to my podcast about resilience. Every guest shares a tragedy to triumph story to give listeners like you the inspiration to push through every single day. Listen now as my next guest shares how they were LifeJacked.
Hi, Jordan. Welcome. Thank you so much for being a guest on my show. How are you?
Dr. Ro, how are you? Thank you so much for having me on.
No, I'm doing great. I'm glad to have you, and I know this is going to be a great conversation. Now, Jordan, what do you do? Because I know everybody has their strategy, right, on what they do when they come to a crossroads. So for you, what do you do when life feels like it's at a crossroads?
Well, I would have done a lot of things differently a long time ago, but last year I had a rapid spiritual awakening. So for me, when life puts me at a crossroads, I know that it's not really a breakdown. It's more of a frequency shift waiting to happen. And I get quiet. I check in with myself. I check in with the state I've been living in, the frequency I've been emanating, and I ask if I'm aligned. And for years, I was successful in media and all these other different things, but I was quite disconnected, and I was sort of living someone else's life. And the real shift for me sort of came after a period of internal work, therapy, and spiritual unpacking. And then one night after a beautiful session, I sort of like looked around and was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And so I feel like my advice, if I could impart any advice to your audience, is sort of go inwards. You know, so many times when we hit a crossroads in life, we tend to look at the outside world. We look to other people to fix us. And I always stress to people, go inwards, whether that's just in meditation or whether that's in any sort of therapy.
I love that you called it a frequency shift as opposed to a breakdown. I love that because I feel like when something is broken down, right, it doesn't work anymore. It's broken. It's defunct. And it's like, and maybe we could fix it. Maybe we can't fix it. But I like that you refer to it more so as a frequency shift because I do know in our life we operate at different frequency levels at different times. And so I hope the audience, the listeners out there, I hope they also look at the times when they're at a crossroads. They just look at it as a frequency shift. I love that. Now, you shared kind of how you were in a session and you kind of woke up and was like, I'm not doing this anymore. So when you were in that moment, I'm sure there was a turning point when you decided to embrace your musical passion. I mean, because you had a great career in media, and it's hard to leave something that pays your bills, right? Like, it's guaranteed. Like, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do, and it will materialize and perform. But the music, because that's something creative, and you never know how that's going to go. So when did you decide to do that?
Well, I have the most circuitous journey to get there. Like you mentioned, I worked in media, all facets of media, and it wasn't that I wasn't happy. I mean, I was content to a degree, but I sort of always felt like there was this hole inside of me. And about a year ago, I went on this journey through Asia, and I ended up in Bali serendipitously, and I met this woman in a tent. And then the backstory, I had not made any music at this point. I had no musical background, and I met this woman in a tent, and she was sort of a healer medium. And I was completely unconscious at this point. I didn't believe in anything at all. And I walked into the tent, and she said, "Oh, you're here for the music." And I said, "What music?" And she said, "Well, you were a musician in your past life, but you actually killed yourself. And you incarnated this time to make it right and sort of fix these lessons." And I'm thinking at this point, like, is she on psychedelics? What is she talking about? I had no clue about any of this stuff. I was very, very, not nihilistic, but just very like atheist, just didn't really believe in anything at all. And then after about a week of healing in different modalities, sound healing, talking to my 7-year-old self, I ended up sort of cracking my brain open and unlocking everything. And when I say sort of a frequency shift, I really did become a different person. I mean, the way I view reality, and we're kind of seeing now with quantum physics, is there's so many different versions of a reality, and we're sort of just shifting between them all day long. And for me, I just sort of embodied this state of someone who was an excellent songwriter, an excellent musician, and sort of just lived in that reality. And it was like the magic unfolded. And then, a couple months later, I've made my first album, and since then I'm at like 5 million streams. I'm on the radio. But like a year ago, no one knew me as this type of person.
Wow, I'm just amazed. I mean, you said that up until this point, like, you had no musical background. Like, that's amazing. Like, you just, and like, you have songs, you have an album. Like, this is just, it's amazing. Who knows what talents we have hidden inside of ourselves that are just waiting to come out. So kudos to you.
Thank you.
So now your journey from the struggles of a closeted childhood to candidly owning your truth in the public eye speaks volumes, because I love when people can be their authentic, true selves, that they don't feel like they have to hide just to please or appease others, because everybody is always judgmental about how we should be living our lives, right? And so
yes, based on their own stories. Yes, projection, I believe, is the word.
They do a lot of projecting, but there are many people in our world, and specifically here in America, that are not able to live their truth, even though there have been vast advances in how we look at things and perspectives, and in that gay marriage is now legal and accepted, and people just understand that people have same-sex partners and they're able to put them on their insurance. And so that's those are the advancements that we have, and all the wonderful pride parades that are always happening around the world. But there are some people that still cannot live their truth and are still not comfortable showing the world that, hey, this is who I love and I am comfortable with that. So what advice do you have for anyone fighting internal battles such as that while trying to live in this ever judgmental world?
Well, I can speak to sort of what it's like to grow up closeted. It teaches you to perform for safety, not authenticity. It wires you to sort of scan every room, measure your words, and make yourself palatable. And my advice to people in general, if they're hiding any part of themselves, is stop trying to be understood by people that are committed to misunderstanding you, that are filtering a version of you through their own biases. I had a spiritual teacher. She said something really beautiful to me once, and she said, don't worry about what people think about you, because no one actually knows the real you. There isn't actually a version of you that's objective, right? Because everyone's filtering you through what they think about you, their projections, their stories. And so, we all know one person who thinks we're an angel, and then we have maybe an ex or an ex-business partner who thinks we're a monster. And so when you kind of see it like that, it's like, well, what am I fretting about? And the moment I started living from my internal knowing instead of external approval, everything changed for me. People say, be yourself, but the real work is sort of unlearning all the ways that you've been trained not to be. And therapy helped me with that, music, and even some psychedelic work. And I sort of just lived by this new truth that is, the more honest I am, the more aligned the world around me is. And you do lose some people when you stop hiding who you are, but then you finally sort of meet your new tribe and your peace from that.
I love that. Stop trying to live for people who are committed to misunderstanding you. Oh my gosh, what a word. Now,
thank you.
Yes, you mentioned that therapy and even some psychedelics played key roles in your transformation. So I'm thinking, is that like ayahuasca ceremonies or is something similar to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, I've tried everything possible, I can say. I mean, I've tried every type of psychedelic, except there's a couple I haven't tried, but for the most part, the main ones, ketamine therapy is actually legal in California, and I ended up trying it here as a way of ego dissolution. And, therapy sort of helped me slow down and see the loops I was stuck in, the overachiever, the good kid, the gay kid, the one trying to fix what was really never broken. But psychedelics really, they're different, right? They give you perspective. They sort of melt away your identity and give you a level of peace, and they let you release yourself from the ego, because the ego is wanting us to stay in this old character that we are not anymore, and it's not serving us. We're trying to become this new person, and the ego wants to keep you safe, so it's pulling you back. And I found with psychedelics, I could sort of crack open the illusion of my past and what it was, and the stories and my thoughts, and were these things even real? I mean, it's so powerful when you sort of realize, like, I am not my thoughts. I'm the observer of my thoughts, and I don't need to energize them. And when you sort of get to that place with psychedelics and therapy, you feel this really deep peace inside of you, because your thoughts are no longer running the show. You're in your default present state, which is really where we all kind of come from as divine beings. And so when I have pain now and stuff, I don't really push through it with therapy and psychedelics. I use them to sort of let me sit with it, teach me things, and then I move into, let's say, a new state.
I tell you, the number one book that I have read that has been life-changing is a book called Ego is the Enemy by Ryan Holiday. I don't know if you're familiar with that book.
Mm-hmm. I'm very familiar with him. Yes.
Yes. Fantastic book, right? I mean, it changed just how I look at things, how I look at my relationships with people, how I look at the things, the outcomes, right, that happen in my life. And so it has just really, like you said, it just has made a frequency shift in me. And I tell you, listeners out there, if you haven't read that book, it is a fantastic book. So I have to ask you, Jordan, as you went through these different processes and you let go of your old self, how would you describe your old self?
Oh God, do we have an hour? I mean, I've had a very, very difficult life. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I've had a sort of life where it's kind of amazing that I didn't give up or succumb to a heroin needle or something. I have had a deep, deep resilience inside of me since I was a kid. I mean, I was relentlessly teased. Then my dad left. I lost 2 best friends. I had a chronic illness for 18 years. I was in and out of the hospital. I mean, the list just goes on. And the old self really was a person with a really dysregulated dysregulated nervous system. And I sort of didn't realize I was in that fight or flight until about a year ago when I started working on my actual nervous system. I was incredibly reactive to people and situations because it was just what I knew. And I would say I was largely like a control freak, because when you have a lot of problems in your life, you try to get ahead of them, right? So you think like, oh, this thing went wrong with a friend and I better get ahead of it because it's going to spiral out of control. And again, this is the ego and the thoughts running the show. It's like, or maybe it won't, right? And sometimes you just take a deep breath and say, like, what if it all works out? And I couldn't tell myself that for a really long time. I was not in a vibrational resonance with love for people, for myself. I was a guarded human being that was, they say, the saying, hurt people, or I was hurt by others, but I also hurt other people. And, there's still parts of me of that old Jordan that I really carried with me, which is diligent and resilient, but there's really a lot of parts of me that I had to leave. And as I left into this new character, let's say, or person, because we're always kind of shifting in music, I had to kind of have a funeral for the old me. And man, my thoughts really fought me along the way. I mean, the ego will go crazy when you're trying to become a new person because it just wants to keep you where you're at. And so the thoughts get really loud, and it's been a grueling journey, but I feel like I'm making a lot of really great progress.
I love that. And so let's go to a frequency shift. Who is the new self after you have nurtured your resilience?
God, I mean, the new self believes that my future is limitless. My new self doesn't believe in lack. I live in abundance. I see opportunities everywhere. I'm more trusting of people. I give them more chances, the ones that deserve it. But I also sort of am really drilling into my purpose of why I'm on Earth. I've looked into Eastern philosophy and some of the things that I believe in. And the new me actually just not only wants to create music, but I want to create a movement for people. I was sick for 18 years and was able to cure it through consciousness work and some other stuff. And I don't want to just make music. I want to teach people how powerful they are inside, and that, just because I don't have a musical background, I was able to do this, and they can go do other things. And I'm becoming this new person that's sort of turning my pain into power. And there's something so beautiful about that, about knowing, hey, I can rise from the ashes, and all this stuff happened to me, and look how I'm doing well, I'm doing great, and none of that stuff could defeat me. And that's what I really try to tell people is like, hey, I'm an example of someone who had a very difficult life, but if you're struggling with something in your life, there are ways to get through this, and you never have to give up. There are people around you that love you, even though they're not showing it at all times. But it really is about loving yourself and knowing that if everything else fell apart, there's one person that you can rely on. And that's the silver lining of all of the trauma in my life and the journey, is that I have this really beautiful relationship with myself, that if I'm in a foreign country alone, I'm still happy and I'm at peace.
I love it. Come on, Phoenix, rising from the ashes. I love it. I love
Thank
it.
Thank you.
Yes. As you have found this new way to express yourself and express your identity through your music, how has it been able to help you connect with your audience and the greater community?
Well, what's interesting about music is that it doesn't lie, right? It really reflects the exact frequency you're in when you create it. And when you overthink music, or you try to make it for a specific audience, or you're ashamed about your words, then it doesn't create a great product. For me, I just sort of bleed out the lyrics. I go into the moments that were really painful for me, and I run the movie over and over from sort of a 30,000-foot observer effect, and saying, like, what was that like? What was it like looking at that? At the time when you're 25, it's like it's the end of your life when someone breaks up with you. And then, 10 years later, when you're looking back, you're like, God, that was nothing. And I learned so much from it. And it's about, when I started, I consider myself more, yes, I'm a singer and I sing my songs, but I consider myself a storyteller. And when I started writing and singing, it wasn't about career moves. It's about survival and truth. And I'd spent years doing these other things, but, people are now hearing my soul speak. I've had strangers message me saying, that lyric said what I've never been able to say. And that's what I want from all this, is connection, not content. And music has helped me to stop performing for people and trying to create a product that I think they'll like. And, it reflects me in a specific polished way, and start just sort of resonating and emanating from my soul. And that's been the most amazing part of all this. It's just feeling like I'm literally channeling something from deep inside of me and put it out in the world, and then, someone will message you and say, wow, you got me through the weekend, and what a gift that is.
No, absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more, because I feel like that's what my podcast is. I have this platform for people like you to come on and tell their stories and just, to help people push through, because we all go through these life-jacked moments where we're like, life is going great and we're happy, and then something comes out of left field and you're just like, whoa, like I didn't ask for that. Like, what is this?
Yeah.
And you got to navigate through that. And that's how I feel. I feel like, it's a connection with the listeners and not just putting out content. I mean, I put out content, of course, on social media and YouTube and all these different places, and every week when I put out a new episode. But I really feel like it's a way to connect with people, to give them encouragement. So I totally understand that feeling of how you just can use your gift to connect with people, and I think it's just fantastic. Now, resilience means, for some people, resilience means learning to move through pain rather than outrunning it, right? Because that's what you said. It's like, you make a frequency shift and you try to just do things differently than you did before. So are there any particular practices or principles that have helped you set boundaries? Because I know you mentioned that you do trust people more, but you also have just, stated that there are some people, though, that you may not give another chance to, and you know how to do that now. And I'm sure it's by setting boundaries. And also, how do you face discomfort head on?
Well, I mean, in my past, because this is what I learned when I was younger, I learned love in an unhealthy way. I used to attract people in situations that mirrored my wounds, not my worth. And that changed when I stopped leaking energy and started protecting my peace. Therapy, for me, sort of made me see that boundaries weren't about keeping people out. They were about keeping my frequency clear, and I would say no to people without explaining why, and yes when I only felt really excited about that. And you have to sit with the discomfort instead of rushing to numb it, which is what I did for so long. And now I do that with things like energy work, somatic breath work, meditation, and really a lot of solitude, especially when I'm making music. But the discomfort itself is really a messenger for you. You don't have to see it as a threat, right? Like, we get the version of people reflected back to us, but that we're experiencing internally. I think people have to realize that, is that, why someone triggers you, why someone makes you angry, why you're not just apathetic when someone says something to you, is because something's going on inside of you. If someone told me, I'll give you a practical example. If someone said to me, hey, Jordan, you're really overweight, and I would know that, no, that's not true about me, I wouldn't react at all. I would just sort of be like, wow, this person's got their own stuff going on, and it's not about me. And so often, sometimes people will say things, and it triggers something inside of us because we think maybe they might be right. And what you then have to ask yourself is like, well, even if they are right about saying this thing about you, why do you have to react? And reacting is quite optional in a lot of situations. I mean, things can happen to you. They happen to you all day long. I'm sure your guests on your podcast have experienced the whole gamut of everything. But you don't have to react in the way that you think. And for me, sort of resilience is knowing that pain and these things that happen to us aren't something to escape. It's something to integrate. And I do a lot of shadow work and a lot of integration. And I take these parts of myself and I say, wow, that person's really triggering me because I think, I think I'm kind of like them. And I think they're a mirror reminding me what's unhealed inside of me. And I sit back with that and I sort of integrate it into my life and say, I'm not healed. And I'm grateful for the fact that they showed me that in the form of a mirror.
No, that's so true. And the people in our lives, that show us that they support us, I feel like those are the people that we really need to lean into, as opposed to these other people that are around us that really don't contribute to our lives in a positive way. And so For
Mm-hmm.
your own, support system, including, like you said, you have your therapy and your friends and a diverse community, how exactly do you feel like they've contributed to your personal and professional breakthroughs?
Well, you have to divide them up based on, they all serve different functions. Some people are just unconditionally loving you and helpful, like, let's say, my parents. When I started making music, they were just wonderful, like, just believed in me in a way that almost no one else did. And then other people didn't believe in me and I was let down by that. But then I'm thinking, okay, don't take it personally. But I sort of used to think that needing support meant I was weak. But honestly, doing it all alone was killing my spirit in a way I didn't realize. And once I allowed myself to be witnessed by people, not in this polished self, but in sort of this raw self, then my life expanded in a lot of ways. And my therapist that I went to for 6 months, 4 days a week, my therapist was like a translator for my subconscious. Whereas my friends sort of were kind of reflecting to me the ways that I had grown. And in some ways, you move past people, you evolve in different ways. It doesn't mean you're better than them, but you just go in different directions. And it sort of harkens back to what I was just talking about people are a mirror, and once we see them as a mirror, we can accept them and we can accept ourselves in a really beautiful way. And, now that I've shifted to sort of this new person, I'm attracting people and community who resonate with the real me. And we think of healing as this solo journey we go through, but it's really relational in a lot of ways.
So in a world that often silences raw honesty, how do you continue to cultivate radical self-honesty? Because you definitely have been very honest and forthcoming on this episode and in this conversation. And so, how do you continue to have the bravery to do that and just be authentic and honest?
Well, I used to have a quite a popular podcast called Shame on You that I hosted with my ex-best friend, and we interviewed all our exes and one-night stands as a way of sort of practicing radical self-disclosure. The idea being that when you're gay, even after you come out, there's a level of residual shame that you operate with, probably unconsciously. And so the idea was, if we put everything out there, and we were able to be judged for every little mistake we made in every little way, especially by people who didn't accept us, let's say, then we could kind of cleanse. And radical honesty for me sort of starts with checking the state that I'm operating from, whether it's my business or whether it's in music. And for every artist, it's like, are you creating from truth or are you creating from performance? Are you doing this in a very calculated way? And I find when I'm writing music, I train myself to tune into energy before action, because the frequency that you create the actual art from, let's say, let's specifically in music, is the frequency people are going to receive. And so I find that, music sort of shifts your nervous system, and that's where I'm connecting with people, and that's like the work I did on myself. And so I want to become a portal for people transforming, and I want to just put myself out there as much as possible, and then perhaps someone else who isn't as extroverted as myself would be inspired by that. And if I can go 6 feet, maybe they go 10 inches. And that there's something really beautiful about that. It's just push through the discomfort, because the growth is beyond that.
Wow. Well, Jordan, it's hard to believe that this conversation has come to an end and the time is up, because it's been such a great conversation. But I have one last question, and that's something that I ask all of my guests, and that is, in your opinion, what do you feel is the best way to build resilience?
I follow a lot of Neville Goddard's teachings. I don't know if everyone in your audience is a fan of those, but I find that, I do this thing called assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, because your state creates your fate. So I build resilience by holding the state long enough for the rest of the world to catch up to me, which is sort of a metaphysical concept. I've done it with business, relationships, stuff like that. The key is to stop reacting to the 3D world and start responding from the version of you that's already whole. And when that version feels far away, I go back to my basics, which is my breath work, my stillness, my imagination, and I picture myself walking through life like I'm at that future point and I'm at that success. And that feeling eventually can kind of become your anchor. Even when there's a storm in front of you and things are going crazy, if you stay with that inner knowing and you stay with that imagination, I find that it's really beautiful. And then secondly, I just sort of, my biggest thing is just put one foot in front of the other. You know, there's a saying by, I can't remember who it's by, but it's when you're walking through hell, walk faster. And, you know, there's something, have compassion for yourself. You're going through something really brutal. It's like, hey, I cleaned my apartment today and I walked and I got a coffee and I called my mom. And that doesn't seem like a lot, but yesterday I was completely depressed. And celebrate those little moments and let them build on themselves, and you'll get that inertia to keep moving forward.
No, that's fantastic. Jordan, your journey is a luminous example of the power of resilience, reinvention, and radical honesty. Thank you for sharing your heartfelt story and inspiring our listeners to embrace their own transformation. For anyone who is listening, remember, your struggles can be the very ground on which you build your most authentic self, just as Jordan did. So, Jordan, how can listeners find and connect with you? And definitely, how can they get access to your music?
So you can listen to my music wherever you get your music, Spotify, Apple, Tidal, etc., Amazon even. It's Jordan Power, Power. And then if you want to follow me on Instagram, it's Jordan J. Power on Instagram. And I'm trying to release another 3 songs before the end of the year. So I would love people to follow along. And whatever platform you listen, make sure you hit the follow button at the top for updates.
Do you have any last words of encouragement for the listeners?
I would say, you know, whatever you're going through right now, it's not proof that you're off track. It's part of the path, and there's something really beautiful in the journey. I was sick for a very long time, and people can understand why I am really grateful for it, and it's because it's taught me so much gratitude for life and empathy for people that are sick and struggling, and the pain, the doubt, the weird in between, all of that's shaping the version of you. And, you know, it's every day we're evolving. And I really just say to people from a metaphysical, spiritual perspective, just remember reality is the delayed reflection, right? So go inside, sit with the pain, sit with the people that trigger you, hold the state, hold the new person that you want to become. And the real you isn't becoming this thing, it's just it's becoming uncovered. And I sort of say to people, even though it feels really far away, you know, it's a dark time you're going through, you will get through it. People always get through it. And just try to hold that in your imagination, whether it's meditation. Try to hold this final state. Try to hold the person that you want to become. And eventually you will realize that your life has become this new version. And try not to react to the outside world is my metaphysical spiritual advice.
Wow. Jordan, thank you again for reminding us that we can move through pain rather than outrun it. I want to wish you and your family nothing but blessings and abundance. Please take care.
Thank you.
Jordan Power, everyone. Be sure to join me next time for more uplifting stories and insights on resilience. Until then, keep pushing forward, embrace the journey, and remember that every setback can lead to a greater comeback. Dr. Rowe, signing off.